a new prospect a couple of years ago came on board. And when I finally asked for their business, they said, James, like we already knew we wanted to hire you, but we've been watching your videos and your podcast for the last 18 months. Yeah, we want to get going. And that's the beauty of YouTube and podcasts is they really start to develop this relationship with you before you actually even get to know them. It builds trust to the degree that you can have one 30-minute conversation and people are moving over $3, $4, $5 million.
Welcome to another episode of Do Business, Do Life. James Conole, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brad, for having me. Excited to chat.
Man, I'm excited. This one was serendipitous. We were chatting before we hit record here, and you had actually got put on my radar. One of our triad members said, hey, I think you just got a shout out on Steve Sandusky's podcast, and it was the episode that he was interviewing you. And you had mentioned just an old YouTube clip off my old show, Process Over Product, and how that had shaped some of your thinking as you'd scaled your practice. And then as we were going live here, you're like, man, I connected with you way back in the day, like 6-7 years back on, I think it was, some give on my prior show, The Elite Advisor Blueprint. So this is fun to see how much you've evolved and how far you've come from kind of the early stages when you were just building your business.
It's been a long build up to this conversation. So excited to jump in and see how the Brad Johnson principles have shaped things.
Well, hey, man, I'm going to take no credit for any of your success because you have absolutely blown up on YouTube. The podcast obviously is going well also, but just for context, for those that aren't familiar with James, between the podcast, between the YouTube channel, over 10 million views and listens. And that's led to, over the last 12 months, over 700 prospects reaching out through those, I guess we can call marketing funnels that have had at least 500,000 of investable assets. So I think I just wanted to lead with that because there's a lot of people that, have YouTube channels or podcasts, but the truth is it's truly driving your business. So let's just dive in. What came first, the podcast, the YouTube channel? How did it all evolve?
Yeah, podcast channel came first. It was, I think back in 2018, I was actually talking to another advisor local here. I live in a town called Cardiff in North County, San Diego, and we live 5 minutes apart, and we were grabbing tacos. And I was saying, yeah, I've heard these podcasts, or I'm hearing these advisors doing podcasts, and it seems to work. And I was, I think, a couple of years into my business and doing fine, doing well, but really trying to see what's that next thing to really accelerate some of the growth. And in that conversation, his name's Scott, was also saying, yeah, I'm kind of also thinking about doing a podcast and doing this thing and just trying it out. So he said, well, let's do a podcast together, and really didn't have a huge strategic plan with it as much as let's just get this thing going and see where it goes from there. So that was 2018, I believe. And, it took us, I think we met like every Friday for 20 weeks somehow just to get like those first 5 episodes. Because like, what do you do? How do you set this up? What does it look like? But it's kind of a long ramp up to actually launching it. But launched that, I think we launched that in 2019, I believe. And it was just a podcast called Real Personal Finance, where no super targeted message. It wasn't to any specific niche or demographic. It was just, let's get together once a week. Let's come up with a question that we hear from clients quite a bit. And let's kind of go back and forth on it. And a lot of these questions we might see the same, and a lot of these questions we might see differently. And it was kind of it was a cool back and forth. So I think there's a really good dynamic between Scott and myself in doing this, and it started growing. And so I said, okay, cool. This is kind of validating that idea that a podcast does work. People do listen to it. But then COVID hit a year after, and I was kind of more, focused on, if you want to call it a niche, like the retirement market. My podcast with Scott was just all over the place. One week we'd be answering a question from a listener who was 21 years old and in the military and saying, what do I do with my TSP? And the next week we'd be answering a question from a listener that was 70 years old and preparing for required minimum distributions and saying, hey, how do I manage this? And so it was just very broad, not super targeted. And I remember when COVID happened and everything went remote, it was kind of that thing that said, I really wish I had a way to talk to my target market directly, kind of like I have here with Scott. But my podcast with Scott's not to any target market. It's just, it's broad and it's educational. It's awesome, but it's not necessarily leading to a huge amount of inbound requests or anything like that. So at that time, this was about a year after I launched with Scott, I launched another podcast called Ready for Retirement. And that was specifically geared, as the name indicates, to retirees and some of the common planning points that they're going through. And so at that time, it was doing the 2 podcasts, one a week with Scott, then one a week just on my own. And then probably, I don't even remember exactly how long, but several months into doing Ready for Retirement, which was just the solo podcast, I was like, this is working. And I was seeing, by the way, that the podcast with Scott, the broad one, it was getting a lot more downloads, but the one that I was doing by myself that was more targeted was getting a lot more inbound leads just because of how specific the questions were and just being branded to retirees. Did that for several months. A friend of mine came along and said, hey, just record yourself while you're doing this and put it up on YouTube. That's where people are really starting to look for content. And in the back of my mind is like, that's kind of dumb. Like, who really looks for finance stuff on YouTube? But he's also a whole lot smarter than I am and kind of in the marketing world. And so I said, okay, like, I'll at least just give it a shot. And I did it. And I did 5 videos and I recorded them all and edited them all and synced the audio and video, and just absolutely hated recording day because then I did all the post-production stuff and didn't know what I was doing. And it took me several hours to do something that should be done in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And long story short, I just like gave up after 5. Like, I'm putting these on YouTube. No one's looking at it. It's taken a huge chunk out of my week to do it. I can't justify all this time for very little effort. So I put 5 videos up. Nothing came of it for maybe 6 months or 7 months or 8 months. And then all of a sudden I started legitimately just like forgetting I even had videos on YouTube. I would be in my inbox and I would get a notification saying, so-and-so commented on your video, or, hey, so-and-so subscribed to your channel. And that, that happened once. And then the next day it happened twice. And then the next day there was 3 or 4 of those things. And all of a sudden it was like, wait, checking these videos that had 2 views or 5 views or 10 views. Now all of a sudden they have 100 views and then 500 views and then 5,000 views. And all of it's kind of relative. But what it was showing me was that unlike podcasts, unlike blogs, unlike social media, even, YouTube is taking this message that I'm putting out there, and it's just constantly searching to see who can benefit from this message. Who is this message for? And when it found that, when it clicked with the YouTube algorithm, like, all of a sudden some of these videos really clicked and really took off. And so it was at that point that I said, okay, there's something to this. There is something here that's not worth just kind of experimenting with, but probably worth going all in on. And so late, I think it was 2021, so 2.5 years ago, it was like, okay, let's commit to doing a weekly video on top of the weekly podcast. And I've been doing it since, and it's been a major driver of a lot of business for us.
Yeah. Understatement of the day, right? Because that's insane. Those numbers, and I've been fortunate where I've worked with some really successful financial advisors over the years, but I can quite honestly say I've never seen numbers like that from a marketing funnel that wasn't like paying for a lot of dinner seminars, right? Or maybe a massive radio show that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, or a TV, paid TV. And so let's maybe start there, because obviously based on your YouTube channel, you're producing that really well. Like, I see a lot of similarities with guys like Mr. Beast that are truly have mastered the craft of creating content for YouTube. I look at some of your thumbnails and just the creation, and I see some similarities there. How much are you actually investing into not editing these yourselves anymore, and the content creation piece of it? Is it like hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, tens of thousands of dollars per year? Because I think that'll be really surprising to advisors spending some pretty big marketing numbers across the country.
Yeah. So when I made that decision in 2021 to say, okay, I'm going to go all in on this, I knew that if I tried to do everything, that I would give up again, no matter how much success there was, because I hated doing the post-production. It's like, I'm not going to do something that I just dread every single week and expect that that's going to be sustainable. So I did go hire an editor. who did the thumbnails, who did the editing. And I kind of just said, like, I'm just going to do this. I'm not even going to give this person a whole lot of guidance. Just let's see what happens. And this person, by the way, I believe he's in Serbia. And so like English is a second language and he speaks really well and communicates really well, but it's not like someone that has any idea what a Roth IRA is or what knows what what Social Security is or any of these things. So it was kind of just trusting, can this person do this? And he did great. And like we've continued to grow and kind of refine that. But I would say that we probably spend, if you take time out of the equation, obviously, which has a cost to it, but if you're just looking at actual spend, it's 20 grand a year.
Wow.
But the cool thing about YouTube, we make more than 20 grand a year just in revenue from YouTube. So YouTube is literally paying us at this point to market, to grow our business. And so when you look at the cost of client acquisition, again, if you take time out, which you can't take time out because there is a significant time commitment, but there is literally no cost to what we're doing in terms of net out-of-pocket costs. If anything, it's the opposite of the more we do, the more people are watching, the more we're getting paid without putting more work. And by paid, I mean just YouTube writing us a check once a month to say thank you.
So I mean, it's kind of if you look at Joe Rogan, he did his podcast for many years where it was an expense. And then once he got the listenership, I mean, the $100 million deal with Spotify, now he gets paid to do that show. So I'm assuming you hit certain viewership numbers, subscriber numbers, where now you qualify on YouTube's platform for as a paid advertiser. And is that how you're monetizing it on that side?
Yeah, once you have over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, they'll start to do a revenue share with you where it doesn't matter if you have 0 subscribers or 10 million subscribers. They're going to put ads on your videos. But once you've hit 1,000, they'll then, I forget what it is. I think it's a 40-60 split where whatever revenue they earn on ads that are played on your videos, they will give you 40% of it. And the cool thing about YouTube is it truly is infinitely scalable. It's not like a dinner seminar where if one seminar you get in front of 50 people, well, if you want 500 people, you got to do 10 seminars. That's 10 times the cost. That's 10 times your time, effort, all that stuff. With YouTube, you could have a video that does 1,000 views or it does 1 million views. And it's not necessarily more time on your part. So it truly is the most scalable thing of you could have one video that blows up and all of a sudden, not like the revenue is a small part of the equation. Like even if we had to pay to be on the platform, we would do it because of what it's doing in terms of business growth. But it's kind of cool to have a platform that pays you to market your business in a pretty significant way.
For sure. Yeah. It sounds like a dream world that most advisors would say, how do I do that? So speaking of, let's get there. So let's go back, and this is a selfish question, being a guy that's podcasted a lot of years. And what's funny is your story is very similar to mine. I recorded you do more of a solo show. I do more of an interview style. And so I started recording just so I could do a better interview, so I could see the individual I was talking with. And then I just started throwing those videos out on YouTube. And to your point, like some of them started popping, and not quite to the level that yours have. But I'm curious, what's the difference of podcast content for you, which, here's an idea. I know you take a lot of viewer and listener questions and just talk through those in your content. But if I'm looking through, here's how I would produce good podcast content versus good YouTube content, or repurpose podcast content for YouTube content, what's the differences in the platforms and what should advisors be thinking about out there?
So there are differences, but I wouldn't say they're incredibly significant. Joe Rogan, for example, you just mentioned his YouTube content is just his podcast. Now people taking clips of that and splicing it up. The main difference I would say with at least the way we're doing it is I have a lot more charts and graphs and like visuals on screen, or I'm even like recording myself doing a case study. So it's more visually, I'm given kind of like these props, so to speak, because I'm not just saying something. I've got the chart right next to me where it's illustrating what I'm saying, or I'm doing the case study that's illustrating what I'm saying, which is importantly, one that this kind of blew me away with YouTube. I saw like a month ago, I was looking at stats, and over 50% of the people that watch our YouTube channel are watching it on their TV. They're not just scrolling on their phone. They're sitting down and watching it like they would watch the evening news or a sports program or whatever it is. And so when they're doing that, it's it's a little bit more conducive to say, do you have graphics? Do you have things that make it a better viewing experience where the message is still the same, but you're providing visuals to support what you're saying is the biggest difference. But we also now, I still do that same Ready for Retirement podcast. And I just record it like this, like the same exact background that you see right here, just me talking like this. And we'll record that. So on Tuesdays, we have a podcast. I just record the podcast, throw it up on YouTube. Saturdays, we release the actual YouTube content, which is a similar message, similar topics, but it's done in a much more kind of, I guess, visually appealing way. It's meant for YouTube because we're also showing graphics and text and other things to support the message.
Got it. So once a week, you're scheduling podcast recording content, and then another time, more YouTube video content, but you're also reproducing the podcast on YouTube as well. So it's not just an audio only. You're also throwing the podcast episodes on YouTube. So kind of like 2 drops on YouTube per week. Is that
correct?
Am I catching that right? Okay. And so if we go to the more what I would call YouTube focused content that you create, when you're doing the graphics or the case studies, is it post-production to where you're kind of talking in front of the screen you're in front of now and they're putting it in after the fact and you're referencing it? Or are you like actually holding the props up on the video? Like what, if advisors were thinking through how to do that, how do you pull it off?
Yeah. So a lot of it is the editor will just take, if I'm saying, I don't know, three things you need to know to retire. Step number 1, blah, blah, blah. Step number 2, blah, blah, blah. The editor will just take, as I'm like walking through step 1, he'll put that step up on the screen. So, just simple things like that. Or if there's certain things I'm saying, he'll type, like that sentence will appear on the screen. So it's just reinforcing what you're seeing. It kind of just like a blog post. If you're reading a blog post and something, like they'll highlight a certain quote or there'll be a certain visual supporting what you see. So it's mostly the editor doing it, unless it's like I'll do a lot of case studies of taking a sample client, changing some of the details. If I want to illustrate the impact of Roth conversions, for example, I won't just go on there and say, hey, you should do a Roth conversions because it can save you a lot of money in taxes. I'll say, hey, here's Joe and Sally's sample, and here's their situation, and here's their projected required minimum distributions, their tax liability. Here's what that looks like. But look what happens if we do these Roth conversions in this way, and we're mindful of these things along the way. And then that you can see the software really quantifying, oh, this saved them $500,000. It's just a lot more powerful for the watcher, the viewer, to say, oh, okay, that's connecting more than just a talking head saying you should do Roth conversions because it's going to save you money. So when it's case studies, so I'll have my laptop in front of me and I'll just do QuickTime screen recording while I'm being recorded. And so the camera's on me recording me talking, and I'll be looking at the camera, and then I'll, look at the case study while I'm doing it. And then and people can go to the channel and see it. So you can just kind of see how it's done, but I'll do it simultaneously.
You're basically, you have the real case study in front of you in like a financial planning software.
Correct.
Which, out of curiosity, which financial planning software are you typically using?
Usually Write Capital, and then occasionally some other things to illustrate different concepts.
Cool. So you might have that sample case study in Write Capital in front of you on your laptop screen, and then you're just going to screen capture that while you're talking through it, throw that to your editor, and now he just throws that overlay right on top of the video.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for walking through that, because some of those little things, those little quirks, it's hard to figure out until you know exactly how you're putting it all together. You had mentioned, James, that you like to think of the algorithm as the audience when it comes to YouTube. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I think I was talking to an advisor not long ago of marketing, and they were just kind of complaining of, the gatekeepers and, the algorithm and all the stuff, and they're suppressing stuff. Like it's hard to get content out there. And it's like, yeah, in some cases, and I think I use this example in the podcast you referenced of, traditionally there have been gatekeepers to things. Like if you want to write a book, you got to get a publisher. If you want to have a radio program, you've got to get a radio station that to let you on their program. If you want to, even nowadays, like on Facebook, get your message out, like you've got to pay ads to get there. I think the beautiful thing about YouTube is I don't view YouTube as a gatekeeper. I view YouTube as like the Sherpa for my message of it saying, hey, give us your message. We're then going to go find who it resonates most with, who, because they're incentivized too. The more people that watch your content, the more they're making. And so, and the more people that like your content, the better the user experience is. The more of those people are going to stay on the YouTube platform. So YouTube is saying, look, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you have something valuable to say, we're not going to try to gatekeep your content. Like we're going to try to get it out there and have as many people as possible see it. And so people say, oh, well, how do you trick the algorithm? How do you kind of hack the algorithm to know, do you have to be super clickbaity? Is it, a certain title length? Is it a certain color in the thumbnail? And just the best feedback I've ever gotten is just think of the algorithm as the audience. YouTube is constantly trying to create an incredible audience experience. So when you're making content, don't try to say, how do I hack the algorithm with this content? Say, how do we make this as insanely valuable to my audience as I possibly can? Because if you do, and if you communicate it in a clear way, and if it's something that the audience truly does find valuable, YouTube's going to take that and maybe put it in front of hundreds of thousands of people or more. So think of the people you're talking to and think of how can this be as clear, as simple, as straightforward, as easy to digest as possible, and as valuable. Like don't make it overly simplistic, but as valuable as possible from an audience perspective, and the algorithm's going to take care of the rest. Don't try to think of it as the alternative of trying to hack some algorithm.
Yeah. I'm curious on that front because I kind of what I'm picking up here as you go through this is you threw your first 5 videos up, and then after a little bit of time, it's like, oh, people started searching, and I just like to think of YouTube. It's Google search bar with video, right? I mean, I've got an espresso maker upstairs. I forget every 3 months or whenever we have to clean it. I always forget exactly what buttons I need to push. So I just go out to YouTube and I'm like, how to clean Breville espresso maker, and boom, I'm on the video I need. So as I look through, I've got your channel pulled up here and I look at some of your past videos. I mean, you've got a video. This is what a real $3.2 million retirement portfolio looks like. It's you on screen holding manage your portfolio like the wealthy up on a piece of paper. And that's got 124K views and it's about 1 month old. Avoid this portfolio withdrawal mistake most people make in retirement. I see it as the titles are kind of like problems a retiree might search for or questions they might have in their head. And that looks like kind of the concept when you look at how you title your shows. And then the visuals are you. And then maybe with like a little diagram with the graph or a little statement, but not too complicated. Can you walk through kind of the thought process on that or what you've learned over the years on how to title videos and the accompanying visual that needs to go with it?
Yes, the content itself can be the best piece of content in the world, but all viewers are going off of when they're actually clicking the video is what's the title and what's the thumbnail. People are just insanely distracted. And so if you're scrolling your phone and you're on YouTube and kids are in the other room screaming and the TV's on and all this stuff's going on, what's going to make people watch your video? How can you capture their attention? And there's a few different ways to do that, but the thumbnail and the title are probably going to be that first thing. Now, you do have to be careful because if you have a thumbnail that makes these promises or title that makes these promises and it's just all clickbaity and then there's nothing of substance in the video, YouTube's smart. They say, okay, people click it and then they're off the video in 15 seconds because you didn't deliver on the promise. So I think it does have to say, what is this video? What are you doing? What's the promise that we're making to the viewer in terms of what they're going to walk away with as a result of watching this video? And then how can we, in a clear, punchy way that captures attention, show that in a thumbnail or in a title? And what I'll tell people is it doesn't have to be rocket science. Just go look at other YouTube channels and don't copy them word for word. And when I say look at other YouTube channels, I mean like non-financial YouTube channels. The finance world isn't really well known for their clever marketing or, progressive way of thinking about how to do marketing. So look at industries that are, look at channels that are. and use the framework for all, say, health and fitness a lot, because there's a lot of similarities between health and fitness and financial planning or wealth management, just in terms of kind of the principles there. And so like health and fitness does tend to be better on the marketing side than financial services does. So go there, browse channels. What are the popular channels? How do they structure their thumbnails? How do they structure their titles? Like you do kind of have to be a student of the game a little bit if you want to really grow. And I would say don't let that hold you back from getting started. But when you do start, you mentioned Mr. Beast earlier. Mr. Beast went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about this other YouTuber that he was helping. And this YouTuber was doing well. I forget what the numbers were, but sometimes like he was doing $40,000 per month in revenue from YouTube, because if you're a YouTuber, like the way you're living is YouTube revenue or brand partnerships, or maybe you have a business on the back end or whatever it was. But the principles that he shared were so insightful, where he was working with this YouTuber and he told Joe Rogan, he said, yeah, we did a couple months of work together. And after that work, he went from like 40,000 a month in revenue to 400,000 a month in revenue. And Joe Rogan's kind of like, whoa, what did you do to 10x, literally 10x his revenue from that? And he said, it wasn't 10 times more work. It was simply, can we make the thumbnail 10% better? Can we get 10% better with the storytelling in the video? Can we get 10% better at the visuals along it? And so really becoming a student of the game, and like those things, when you're done, you're not really done. Can you make the thumbnail better? Can you make the title better? Can you constantly improve? And if you can make all these little subtle improvements across the board, it's not like, okay, cool, that video went from getting 10,000 views to 12,000 views. It's, well, now that 10,000 view video is getting 100,000 views. Now that 100,000 view video is getting 1 million views. So there really is an exponential growth potential with this. And so to answer your question, like, yeah, it does matter what your thumbnails look like and what your titles look like, but don't let that be, I think some people say, oh, I don't know what to do for a thumbnail, so they don't get started. Or I don't know how to title my video, so they don't get started. So it's start, just do it, get good at it, and then just commit to getting better and better at it. And you're going to have more and more success as you continue to grow.
Love that. I had a mentor share with me when I was just starting the podcast. He's like, the beauty of starting is you get to fail when nobody's listening or watching, in YouTube's case. And it's funny, I went back and I looked at your earliest videos, which on YouTube was about 6 years ago. I don't know if you've even gone back down memory lane lately, but the first one was kind of you talking to camera of like, here's kind of what our firm does. And there was like a little bit of editing, not a ton there, but you could just tell it was early on your YouTube journey. And it's cool to see the evolution as you look at your more recent videos and just what you've learned along the way. I'm curious, you mentioned going to other industries for inspiration. Are there channels, are there YouTube creators that you could list that really influenced your journey on YouTube?
It was Patty Galloway. So Patty Galloway is actually a guy in the YouTube industry. He had, I forget what he called it, but like some program, like a YouTube accelerator type program that I went through that was totally overkill for me. I was like, oh my gosh, like there's just so much that you could know here, that you could learn here. And the hard part for financial advisors is we're not professional YouTubers. Like this isn't our livelihood. It's this thing that at least kind of starts on the side, and we want to get as good as possible. But to truly get good at YouTube, like I said, you want to be a great storyteller. You want to have great hooks. You want to be engaging. You want to speak well. You want to communicate. Like there's all these things you can always get better at. So it was a little bit just completely overwhelming. Not a little bit, a lot. But just so many things. When you start to learn what goes into a good video and what are the, not even a good video, but the packaging of a good video or thumbnails to look at. So I think in his course, like he provided a lot of great examples of great thumbnails, great titles, the, just structure of, I don't know, just tell a story, like whatever it is. There's just so many little nuggets and takeaways and examples that I took. And like it's something that even going forward, like I want to become a better and better student of, to be totally honest, is I'm not watching enough YouTube today. I'm not studying it enough today because there's other responsibilities within the business that are still things that I'm fully responsible for. So Patty Galloway, I mean, I think he's on Twitter, he's on YouTube, and his whole thing is how do you get really good at YouTube? So, follow one or two people like that and just consume what they put out there.
Love it. And that's Patty, P-A-T-T-Y.
Paddy, Patty Galloway.
Patty. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll throw him in the show notes. He'll get some love from you, I'm sure. I'm sure there'll be some clicks on that link. Let's go to the actual content. Back to hooks. So we talked about thumbnails, we talked about the title, and let's compare it to a dinner seminar. I've had many very successful advisors over the years. And if you think about, hey, I've got a 45-minute, a 60-minute presentation. Well, it's in person. And unless it's like really, really bad and they're like, this is so bad, I'm not going to sit here for the free dinner that follows this presentation, they're not going to get up and leave their seat and walk out of the room. Now, you go to YouTube, back to what you said earlier, you're scrolling on your phone, most likely. Maybe they've got, YouTube TV at home. But if there's not some immediate value on the front end, that first 15, 30 seconds, odds are they've gone. They're scrolled on to the next video. So when you think about content creation, different from, there's a very linear learning journey and like a dinner seminar that you don't have to necessarily be rushed. Do you reformat value on a YouTube video to make sure you hook them and they stick around, or how do you think about it differently for a video?
I try to be as concise as possible without sacrificing anything on the value front. So I think, like, I know when I first started the first podcast I did with Scott, that it was like, we need to be different somehow. We need to be funny, or we need to tell cool stories, or we need to do something so people feel like they're, in the room with, and it's just like, no, if you're funny, be funny. If you're a great storyteller, still tell great stories. If you're, I don't know, can have some serious gift, then use that serious gift. But I think I'm not funny on the videos. I'm not, like, I do say like storytelling of, if I'm using an example in a case study, kind of presenting the character, what's the problem or the challenge that character is up against, what did we do to kind of walk them through, and what was the final outcome of all that stuff. But even that's just like very basic framework of a story. It's not like these stories that you can't get enough of. No, James is telling these stories. So I just try to be as concise as possible without sacrificing anything on the value side. And even then it's, maybe 15, 20-minute videos sometimes. But we live in a very distracted world. So I'd say don't try to add fluff, don't try to add stuff. And I could even be better. I could be more concise. I do tend to kind of talk in circles sometimes and repeat and repeat and repeat. And if I watch videos back, I'm like, why did I feel the need to say that 3 times or 4 times? Like, just say it and move on. But to your point, Brad, you don't have a captive audience. They're not stuck in a chair with their steak dinner until you're done with the presentation. I try to structure it as a 2 to 3 sentence hook, and the hook can be pretty simple. But just it's the promise essentially. What are you going to walk away with from this video? And then one other thing I learned, and this was actually in the Patty Galloway course I just mentioned, I used to have a little bit of a hook, and then it went into like a 15-second promo of like, the route, ready for retirement, all the stuff, add some cool music, and then transition into it. And Patty's point was, and he didn't say this to me specifically, he said it to the whole cohort, get rid of that. That doesn't add any value. I see so many videos, like if I watch financial advisor videos sometimes, they say, in this video, you're going to learn how to save a bunch of money in taxes, or whatever it is. They'll say the hook. And then it's like 15, 20 seconds of music and like some B-roll and some stuff. And we like that because we think, oh, cool, we're getting our brand out there. But the person watching couldn't care less. Like, just tell me how to save taxes. Just tell me how to do this. Yeah. And if you fulfill that promise and show me actually how to do it, then cool, I'm going to subscribe and I'm going to watch a lot more of your content. And if I watch a lot more of your content and one day I need help with my planning, I'm going to go to your website and reach out to you and kind of enter your funnel and all those things. So I think the best thing is just take out fluff and try to be as clear and concise as possible while still providing the right amount of value.
Yeah. I watched a couple of your more recent videos before we hopped on here because I just wanted to get a feel for just kind of how your content had evolved and changed. And a couple of things to that point that I noticed. Number one, you see a lot of YouTube creators say, don't forget, like and subscribe. and you didn't have to say it because you had a little just like a lower third across the bottom, and it's just the thumbs up, click, like, and then you see the little bell, click. And so basically you visually showed it without you having to sit there and say it as the guy doing the YouTube video. So that was one thing I picked up, back to conciseness. The other thing, in the one I watched, it was the case study, and you basically just got a real life question. And they said, hey, we've got this amount of money. We need to retire in like a year. It was the bucket video, the first bucket video you just dropped. And I like to think that because you're willing to just read a question, like pretty much unfiltered, you didn't share any, personally identifying information on it. But I like to think that creates some sort of like two-way conversation, even though it's just you speaking to video. And it's a real life retirement problem. So if they have it, I'm guessing there's probably some other YouTube viewers that have that as well. Has that been a big piece of what do you believe has grown the channel? Just like it's very like almost like a personal conversation via video?
I think a little bit. And that was actually the podcast you were watching. Is that so? I think the podcasts are
okay.
more just reading the question. And so
Yeah.
like I know that's the podcast. A viewer wouldn't actually know, hey, this is the podcast. And then Saturdays is the actual video. But like you wouldn't have seen any actual graphics supporting what I said other than like the like button popping up or whatever. So yeah, I think so. I think we get a lot of questions and from people who watch a channel and they say, hey, I love the approach. I love that you just take real questions and provide obviously not advice, but you provide some context or a framework of how to think about this. And so I do think a lot of people do feel like it's a conversation with them as opposed to just just a monologue. And like there's more things that we want to build and do to even further that in the future that we've got on the roadmap. But yeah, I think that's a part of it, is that not necessarily relatability, but that sense of, they're involved in it. It's not just me sitting up here talking down as much as I'm taking what they're giving me and making content around it.
Yeah, it's like a co-creation of content, really. I mean, they're like, imagine, I would like to think if James is on a YouTube channel answering my specific question that I submitted, there's a pretty high likelihood that individual is going to reach out to you when they watch that video. I'm assuming this has happened a time or two before where you get the question, you answer it on a YouTube video, and then that individual becomes a client. Is that fair?
Yeah. I don't probably, like I stopped taking on clients a little while back. And so I actually don't talk to anyone that's coming in through the pipeline anymore. So I'm sure that's definitely the case. To be totally honest, though, I don't know.
Okay. Well, hey, we're going to get to that then too, because that's fun. Let's go back to just the podcast where you are taking questions. How do those questions get to you? Are they submitted through the YouTube channel? Are they submitted through the website? What's the kind of the information flow there?
So I used to have a separate podcast website that was just readyforretirement.com or .co. And one of the pages was submit your question. And so the call to action at the end would be, hey, if you have a question that you want answered on a future episode, go to readyforretirement.com, submit your question, and we'll look to answer it in a future episode. So it used to be that way. When we rebranded and updated our website and all these things, we just to avoid confusion, we stopped having a podcast website and a company website, and we have like just a podcast page now on our current website. On that page, there's, I believe, a form for people to submit their question. More often than not, people listen to the podcast, a link to our website is in the show notes, or they just Google the website, and they'll find the hello@rootfinancialpartners.com email address just somewhere on the website and just email in. So they're not necessarily going through a form. They're just emailing us. So it's a little bit of both. It's probably part of the funnel. Not even part of the funnel, but just something I should structure a little bit better. But we get emails and I have an executive assistant who helps to just take any emails that come in that way and organize them in one place where I can go on recording day, just have a list of questions, say, okay, what one makes sense to answer, and just several dozen questions there to choose from.
Cool. That has to be really fun, where essentially the content's being created for you.
The hardest part about starting is, what do I talk about?
Yeah.
And when you're in the business, like we always, there's everything to talk about. When there's everything to talk about, it's hard to choose like where to even start. And so, yeah, now that it's specific questions with nuanced answers, it does make it easier to create some content around that.
What's the most surprising video that popped where you like dropped it and you're like, wow, I did not see that one coming?
I forget exactly what it's called. I think it's something along the lines of 5 things you need to know before you retire, or you'll wish you knew before you retired or something. And it was a video where it was just a crazy hectic time at work. And I was running behind on like the production schedule and just tons of meetings, all stuff. It's like, I need to do a video. And so I literally just like Googled it, or I saw that title somewhere and I said, okay, cool. I'm just going to like, this is going to be a throwaway episode just because I need to fill this week's episode. I don't have the time to put a ton of effort into it though. So I just used that title and then threw some things that, to be totally honest, I didn't even think were like that significant, almost like insultingly obvious. Like, I wish I had, I don't know, planned better. I wish I had, like, just brought like things that you wouldn't expect to be, oh, wow, that was amazing.
Mhm.
And I just recorded the episode, and at the time, I think it was my highest viewed video. Like, it got 250,000 views or something. And I was just blown away. It's like, wow, that took me 30 minutes to record and create because I literally didn't have time to do it. And it just goes to show that there's been other videos like, I thought this was going to be a no-brainer. This one was going to go crazy.
Yeah.
And no one viewed it. And then sometimes I thought this video just kind of sucks and I just have to do something because I'm running behind on production schedule and people like it. And so I heard someone say one time, every time you put a video out there, it's like buying a lottery ticket and you just don't know what one's going to hit. So buy as many lottery tickets as you can, knowing that some are going to hit and they're not going to be the ones that you always expect.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great lesson in putting in the reps consistently. In my early podcasting career, somebody said, don't do your first episode if you don't plan to do your 100th. And I think that applies to podcasting. I think it definitely applies to YouTube as well, just based on, you're like, I had to get one out this week. So what I hear you saying is I committed, there will be a consistent cadence on the podcast and on the YouTube channel that my audience can depend on me to put something out for them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
How important do you think that piece of the pie is? It's just the consistency of content.
I think it's really important. In part, like, I don't know how many people are sitting there eagerly waiting for the next video to come out or the next podcasting to come out, but a lot of the questions that come in, it's honestly, it was kind of weird to me at first. People like, hey, we can't wait for your podcast to come out because I think the most recent episode, the question and answer, they said, my wife and I, we listen to it over dinner and then go on a walk to discuss together. And I'm like, that's weird. It's honestly my first thought. Like people will be like, it is, and Brad sounds so weird, but they're like, well, like my wife and I, we're watching like The Office right now. It's just like, let's watch this as we're winding down and like kind of fall asleep to it some nights. And people will literally say that same thing with, like, hey, we kind of fall asleep to your videos on. And it's just, it feels weird, but it's like, okay, I guess people like are expecting these at certain times and they are knowing when they come out and they are kind of, they have you as part of their life in a weird kind of cool way, but it just becomes part of people's routines. And so
Yeah.
I don't know what would happen if you missed a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but I kind of don't want to know at the same time. I just want to keep doing it.
Well, I think you nailed the word. It's routine. Like if you actually become part of their routine, think about the influence that creates.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think there's a form of trust. It's like James is consistent and he's dropping a video every Friday or whenever they drop. There's a form of trust created by that because you're just showing up consistently over and over and over. And so I think there has to be some psychology in that of like, if I can trust him to add value in my life once a week through a YouTube video, I can trust him with my savings too, or his team. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let's keep going down the path. We've hit a ton on content. So thanks for just like, first off, like playing all out and just sharing openly. I really appreciate that. Anything before we move to what I would say further down the sales or the marketing funnel of YouTube, anything else on creation, videos, just the actual content out on YouTube that's worth mentioning before we move on to how they actually now go into getting into your office?
No, I mean, nothing that needs to be touched upon.
Okay. So you mentioned COVID earlier, and I think COVID obviously was not great for a lot of people's lives, but when it comes to finance and being able to run a virtual practice, I mean, everybody had to become very familiar with Zoom. Um, and so now it took what typically historically has been a face-to-face appointment process, and people got comfortable with doing it just like we're recording this interview right now, virtually. So with that, what are the funnels of, like, I watch a YouTube video that James is on, or I listen to the podcast? What's the call to action that takes them from that to I'm now interacting with you or your team or taking the first step to an appointment?
It's actually fairly subtle. I know I think a lot of marketers would say don't make it as subtle, but YouTube really prioritizes the viewer experience on YouTube. So I'm not trying to redirect people away from YouTube. I'm actually trying to keep them there. But at the end of every single video, there's just a standardized clip that just says something along the lines of, if you want to know how we can help you get the most out of life with your money, visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com. And then it moves on to the next video. So that's it. And so if someone's watched the full 15 minutes or 20 minutes, then they see that. And then I think in the description of each video, we probably have want to know more, visit us at rootfinancialpartners.com. So it's not any super clever call to actions or anything. It's really actually prioritizing keeping people on YouTube, not trying to redirect them to the website. And then from there, they go to our website and they click on a Start Here button, and they go through a filter to essentially book a call. And that's probably the process that has to evolve the most with podcasting YouTube, as it's really started to grow pretty significantly. Is in the past, I would take every single new prospect call. And at first it was me taking on every single new prospect. And then it was, okay, I'm taking the call, but I'm kind of saying, you're not going to be working with me. You're going to be working with this other member of the team. And that was just kind of plunk. It's like, oh, I'm actually talking to James. Great. So excited. I love your YouTube. And they say, well, actually, Brad, you're going to be working with this advisor. And then it was kind of like they felt a little let down on that. So they said, okay, well, let's just switch to, they book directly with the advisor. So they go to the Start Here button on our website, and there's a questionnaire that people go through, and it essentially lets them know, like, it screens out for essentially assets. Like right now, there's a minimum asset level that we hope to drive down, but just because of all the demand coming through, we have to try to filter in some of the people that are coming in. So it filters that way. It filters just saying we don't do hourly or project work. So people that say, no, I'm looking for hourly or project work, and just kind of redirects them to a screen that says, hey, we don't have the capacity to offer this right now. Here's a referral to, I don't know, like XY Planning Network or Garrett Planning Network or something like that, where people can find that. And so if they get through the questionnaire, they would then be redirected to the actual advice, like any advisor. It was just we use Calendly as a round robin, and whatever advisor happens to be available, they would book with them. And then the advisor would have an intro call and say, okay, what are you looking for? Okay, cool. Then there'd be a second meeting, which is a proposal meeting. And after the proposal meeting, there's a check-in meeting. And it was just, we had so many leads coming in that we were looking at advisor calendars, and 20% of their week was just these new prospect calls or proposal meetings or chasing down statements or trying to get the next call scheduled. And I know I mentioned, at the beginning, you said in the podcast where I kind of shouted you out, I said it was naming the process that was really helpful. But the other thing that you talked about in a separate podcast was having a separate marketing system, sales system, kind of, I forget what you call everything else, but fulfillment, culture, all the 5 pillars, I think you call it, of something or other. But we reworked all that to say, this is just taking a lot of time, advisor time. And maybe the coolest thing about YouTube and podcast is, I remember a new prospect, quick story, I'll come back to this. A new prospect a couple of years ago came on board, and I had the intro call with them. I then did like the full discovery meeting, then I did the full proposal meeting, and then I did like the check-in to say, do you want to come on board? And when I finally asked for their business, they said, James, like we already knew we wanted to hire you. We just wanted to kind of see, is there a reason not to? But we've been watching your videos and your podcast for the last 18 months. Yeah, we want to get going. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're doing a lot of work up front when they're like, we're ready to go. So,
Yep.
and that's the beauty of YouTube and podcasts is they really start to develop this relationship with you before you actually even get to know them. And so in the last 3 or 4 months, we've revamped our entire sales process where now everyone goes to the website. They book an explore meeting with our VP, Ari Taubleib, and essentially he has a 30-minute call with them and closes after that one call. So it's, do you want to work with us or not work with us after going through our process? And so it used to be this thing of prospects would go meet with an advisor, go through a few meetings, and we calculated that's probably 7 to 10 hours of time that the advisor and the associate is spending on preparing proposals, meeting, back and forth, all this stuff. So now it's 30 minutes of time. The close rate's gone way up. And now it's people reach out, they have that call, and then they're kind of paired with whatever advisor we think would be the best fit for them or whatever advisor has availability this month to work with them.
Okay, so let's go into that. So you said it's a VP on your team, which makes it sound like one person is doing all of these 30-minute intro calls. Is that
Correct.
fair?
Correct.
In that 30-minute intro call, it sounds like it's more the philosophy of, is it the Sequoia system? I think that's the name of your financial planning process,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
So is it kind of an overview of, hey, here's philosophically how we think about holistic financial planning, walking through that, and if that aligns, okay, it makes sense to proceed? Or,
Mm-hmm.
or like, if you can deconstruct that a little bit, I'm just curious now, because I've never seen a system like that or heard of one.
Yeah, they scheduled the call. And honestly, Ari could probably walk you through this better than I could, but he essentially is like, what hurts? Why are you reaching out? What prompted you? And there's, hey, I'm about to retire. I'm terrified of making big mistakes, or my current advisor doesn't do what you guys do, or I love whatever it is. So they, spends maybe 10 minutes talking about just very high level. What prompted you to reach out? What are some of the pain points you have? He then says, great, is it okay if I walk you through our Sequoia system and show you how Root might be a good fit to help? You say, sure. So he kind of walks them through step by step, kind of relating how certain parts of that would address the pain points that they have. Then essentially wraps up by going over, making sure you understand how we charge, making sure you understand like what it looks like to work with Root. And then he essentially says, you're going to work with Chris, you're going to work with JT, you're going to work with Carly, and books what we call the kickoff meeting, where they're in. They're saying, yeah, we want to do this. We want to move forward. And a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever it is, they're having the kickoff meeting with their advisor where they're actually starting to go through that Sequoia system. So
Wow.
It's really streamlined that upfront
Really
process.
cool. Really cool. And so when they get assigned to an advisor, is it more like if I look at like kind of the very standard, this is obviously being very simplistic. It's like typically the discovery meeting is the first meeting where it's kind of a fact find. The second meeting is maybe high level, rough draft of the plan where if that makes sense, maybe there's an ACAP that happens there to engage. Maybe there's pay a fee depending on the firm, but it's now, okay, we're moving forward. And then the third meeting might be the allocation meeting, which is, okay, here's where everything goes. Are you saying basically that first 30-minute there is really acting as that, hey, commitment, and then now you're going straight into that meeting with the assigned advisor where it's like, okay, let's get the lay of the land, let's figure out how all this works, and then they're essentially committing, like, are they paying fee? Are they moving assets to engage you guys? Like, where does that happen in the process?
Yeah. So after the initial conversation with Ari, we scheduled a kickoff meeting. They actually signed the advisory agreement before they meet with the advisor. Like they're saying, yeah, we're committed.
30-minute.
After the first 30 minutes, they're signing the advice. Now they haven't moved assets, they haven't paid a fee or anything, but it's essentially saying, because we're going to jump right into planning. And so we need to make sure like that agreement is signed. And we like the out we give them is say, look, if you have that first kickoff meeting, which is like that discovery meeting, if you're not totally in line with how that's going, or feel like, I don't really, resonate with this advisor, whatever, like you don't have to transfer assets. I mean, we could part ways at that point. You haven't really committed your life for savings or anything at that point. But 97% of people do move forward at that point. So it's after that kickoff meeting, so that's the discovery meeting. We call like that the purpose aspect of Sequoia system. What are we actually planning for? Let us understand more about what success looks like to you, and really connect with that vision you have for for your retirement or for your future, for the things that you want to do. After that, we go to what we call like the income meeting of just, can you retire? So it's right capital projections, financial projections. Between the kickoff meeting, which others might call a discovery meeting, and the income meeting, so meetings 1 and 2 with the actual advisor, assets are transferring over in between that. And then they have the income meeting. Then after the income meeting, they have the investment meeting. They have the investment meeting, they have the tax. So like there really is a structure. They know exactly what the meetings are going to be. And they have that first meeting with the advisor before they actually commit to transferring anything. But it is happening after that.
Cool. But hey, that's awesome. That's unique too. I can honestly say in almost 2 decades of doing this and working with hundreds of advisors, I have not seen anything like that. So that's why I love doing this podcast, is I'm learning. So you do this kind of upfront, like here's our philosophy. If it makes sense to move forward, there's kind of a high level discovery with their assigned advisor. And then you're basically the next steps from there, or your purpose meeting, as you call it, are walking through the rest of your plan: income, investments, taxes, and then I believe the last world is security, as you call it.
Which, estate planning and insurances.
Okay, cool. So basically each following meeting is one of those worlds. And so is it 4 following that, or do you combine any of those together?
It's typically 4 to 5 meetings, kind of like a little sprint of, hey, you're going to come on board. So the hard thing, I think, for most advisors, this is where, I don't want to get us too off on a tangent, but I think a lot of people think, oh, YouTube, like you cracked the YouTube code and like everything's set. It's like, well, no, that's a big part of it. That gets the inbound leads coming in through the top of funnel. But then it really forces you to standardize kind of like the sales process, the fulfillment process, even the team and like culture. And how do you make sure the team's being trained and developed? And one of the coolest things about the YouTube channel and podcast is a lot of advisors are watching. And so when we're putting out job postings, or when we're looking to add roles, I'm just blown away by the quality of people that are reaching out to say, hey, we want to be part of this. And so now we're building just such an amazing team, and that podcast and YouTube channel kind of serves as like training, and we're consolidating it, and we're creating Root University internally of how do you run a kickoff meeting? How do you run an income meeting? How do you run? So it helps us to really standardize these things, provide a ton of resources, because you do want that really just that consistency of philosophy and that consistency of approach. We don't want 10 incredible advisors that all think differently when it comes to investments and planning, and even the way they speak about certain topics. So the beauty of YouTube and podcasts goes so far beyond just getting leads. It builds trust to the degree that you can have one 30-minute conversation and people are moving over $3, $4, $5 million. You can then go through a process and people are already excited about it and know about it. And advisors kind of know exactly what to expect and do in that. So it creates challenges in terms of, okay, we now like really need to create these things. But when you do create them and build them in a more systematic way, it like really becomes a pretty incredible thing all the way around. It's not just the lead generation. That's a cool part of it.
Yeah. And for context, I'm looking at some notes you submitted before we hopped on here. So approximately 11 on your team now at the firm?
We will have our 16th team member join in 2 weeks, and then we'll probably add 2 or 3 not too long after.
Okay, so 16 now. You're sitting at around 355 million of AUM currently. I'm sure it's grown a little bit probably since you submitted this, but is that about right?
Just over 400 today.
Oh, over 400. Okay, well here we might have pulled from a website that was a little old then.
No, I think that's probably the form I submitted before this, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. It's like, but that's just to give perspective. Like I mentioned, Ari's doing full-time sales calls. He has probably 100 calls a month with people with 200 million or north in assets. And so it's like the growth potential is pretty significant, and it's more just we need to make sure that we're, and thankfully, like I said, there's really wonderful advisors reaching out to join what we're doing. We just don't have the capacity to onboard everyone that's reaching out right now. So we're pushing some of that out.
Good problem to have, man. Good problem to have. So, and then for context, over the last 12 months, you said 700 prospects, but about 120 million of new AUM has onboarded in approximately the last year or so.
Yeah, net new assets for 2023 was around 130 million, and that includes like any clients that left. So new assets that came on board is probably 135, 136, and then
Yeah.
a little bit of attrition. So call it 130 for 2023.
Cool. So if we look at that, where my head goes, and you know, looking at the last 3 years of Triad, like I feel fortunate, like we've grown pretty quickly as well, which creates other breaking points within a business. So how long ago did you transition out of, hey, at this point, James can't see any more individual clients. I have to, start focusing on growing the business and leading the business. How long ago did that transition happen?
August of last year, I took on my last client, and I still have client. Like I still do have a good number of clients, and I'm in the process of either fully transitioning or at least bringing on another lead advisor to the relationship so that I'm made a little bit redundant and can be part of the relationships that I love all of them, like truly love. Like I'm close with them even beyond just like a client. So that's the process that we're going through right now to actually do that with current clients.
Cool. And what sort of model do you have? I know there's all kinds of different models out there as far as here's the relationship or the salesperson, here's the service advisor, here's the planner. What does like an advisor pod look like for you guys currently?
A pod or a team looks like, and we're like building this out, so it's not perfectly structured this way today, just as team members are coming on, but one senior advisor and 3 pods. And a pod is one lead advisor to one associate or support advisor. So we want to build very much that coaching mindset within the firm of a senior advisor is like a player coach, where none of the advisors have business development responsibilities, but they absolutely have mentorship and development responsibilities of the seniors, making sure that leads are continually being developed and grown and just being the best advisors they can. The lead advisor is making sure that their associate advisor is being developed and grown and mentored to ultimately become a lead advisor. So the structure is one senior advisor on a team, and then 3 lead advisors on a team, and then one associate to every lead to make sure that they're in every single meeting. They're, that gives direct mentorship responsibilities to that lead advisor to say like that your associate, one of your responsibilities is coaching them and developing them and making sure that they're really growing in a way to ultimately become a lead here at Root when they're ready.
Yeah. How has your firm evolved? Like the early days, pre-YouTube, pre-podcast, I'm going to assume it was very similar to a lot of brick and mortar firms where it's like, hey, we do some local marketing. They come into the office for an appointment. We sit across the conference room table. I have to think now with so many leads coming in virtually, the vast majority of those aren't even in California. How has your kind of client environment or the interactions, how has that had to evolve as YouTube has grown?
Yeah, we're a virtual team. There are 2 of us today in San Diego, another one coming on board in San Diego shortly, but it's San Diego, it's LA, it's Texas, it's Arizona, it's Nebraska, it's Virginia, it's I'm missing a couple, but yeah, the whole team is virtual. So
Wow.
we're putting a lot of work into how do we, like, culture is the next big thing. Is hey, we have all these amazing prospective clients coming in. That's happening. It's now how do we create something that nobody wants to leave? Like, how do we create something that every advisor feels like this is just the absolute best place to work? Every team member feels like this is the absolute best place to work. Everyone in the industry says, hey, I want my career to, like, I want to go to Root. Like, how do we create that so it becomes just a really fun place full of the best and the brightest and the most engaged people? And then when you attract amazing people and you attract amazing prospects, there's going to be a good combination of things that happen at that point.
Yeah. Very cool. I didn't know you had a virtual team. So how many I guess it's called senior advisors. How many senior advisors now do you have on the team that would be kind of like the leads?
So it's kind of like a hybrid. Like this, we were at 7 people 4 months ago, and we'll be, like I said, at 16 in a little bit. So like so much of this happened so quickly that it's like we have the org chart of what we want it to look like. And it's now really doing a lot of work on career paths so people know what's available and give them the tools needed to get to where they want to go, and also see like who wants to be like lead advisor. And they're just incredibly relational, maybe manage, a bunch of client relationships, and that's what they love. Others are more of that coach and mentor, and they say, no, I want to develop others. And even a senior advisor is still an advisor, but it's more of like that player coach role where they're also developing others. So we've got the structure, and now it's just, and we've got awesome people. And then now it's just, hey, who wants to do what, and go at it. Very
cool. Well, that's fun. I mean, our team doubled last year at Triad. Sounds like you're going through that exact same thing right now. So I'm happy for you, and good luck all at the same time, right? Because it's, one of the things I found as an entrepreneur, as you grow, just things break. It's part of it, and leaning in and battling through those storms is part of being an entrepreneur. So as we wrap here, we're getting really close to the end. Just sheer curiosity, what has been the craziest YouTube prospect that has come through, whether it was like, some crazy amount of assets that just, hey, James, I saw your YouTube video, love to work with you guys, or just a crazy story that obviously don't share any personal information, but love to hear like the craziest one that's happened to this point.
Craziest thing. This isn't crazy. It kind of, I mean, you, in terms of assets, few clients in the 12 to 14 million-ish range from that, which is, I would never think on YouTube, people's significant net worth is like, but yeah, I mean, it's people across the board who, just YouTube's becoming that. No crazy stories, I would say. That the funniest thing is just people, it feels weird even saying, but like they look at you like a celebrity. Like, oh, I'm not taking on clients, but sometimes, clients will come on and they'll just really love the videos and stuff. And so I'll pop into their first meeting, and it just feels stupid even saying. There's like starstruck, and it's so weird. And it's just like, but that's the cool thing, is like people really start to resonate and connect with you. And it's not like a dinner seminar where like it means you're doing 50 conversations with them to get to that point. They've just watched 50 videos that took no more time to produce than you otherwise would have. So it does lead to this weird element of celebrity. I shouldn't even say weird. Like, it's cool. Like it's like, I don't know, if you're listening to Susie Orman or Dave Ramsey or whatever, like it's cool for you to get to meet them. And so it's kind of just the same element. Obviously at a lesser scale though.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's deserved, man. I mean, the truth is, a lot of people want the end results, but they're not willing to do the work to get there. And, it's the old saying, the overnight success that was 10 years in the making. And the truth is, like, go back, like anybody listening to this, go back to James's YouTube channel and go to the early ones, and you'll just see the evolution. Go back to the podcast, go back to the early ones. You'll see the evolution. And I love that you just have continued to put in the reps, be curious, grow, and build something that deserve to be built, obviously, because a lot of people, it's resonating with them. Well, as we wrap here, there's also a personal side of James we haven't gotten a ton into, but you're married, you have a daughter, read in your background, you're actually a rugby player. So, as a football player, that's not too far off. But I would love to hear your definition. This is the Do Business, Do Life podcast. What does doing business and doing life mean to James?
I know Michael Hyatt and you are close, and he's just on the team, and I'm a big Michael Hyatt fan. And one of the books I recommend most often to people is the book Living Forward. And it's kind of that sense of, yeah, you're an entrepreneur and you're building a business, but how do you take that mindset to your life? Like, how do you think of yourself as the entrepreneur of your life? If you can construct and create whatever you want to create, which is going to look different at different seasons of life. Like right now, I've got a young daughter, got another one on the way, got a young family, got just things happening. So it's not one thing, but it's more of, in the same way I want to craft an ideal outcome for the business and what things need to happen for that to be the case. Well, I also want to craft an ideal outcome for my life. And the two are obviously very intertwined. So it's not one thing in specific as much as it is very much, Michael Hyatt's whole thing in that Living Forward book is how do you imagine yourself at your funeral? And like, who are the people that are speaking? What do they say about you? And okay, cool. What can I do today to work towards that? And so like this changes all the time. What can I do today to be a better husband? And obviously fail a whole bunch, but keep trying. And what can I do today to grow a better business? What can I do today to be a better team member and all those things? And so I think doing business, doing life is just that integration of every single day. What are you doing to build not the business that you want, but like the life that you want? And the business is absolutely a key component of that supports that and is a hugely enjoyable part of that.
Love it. Well put, James. And yeah, as Michael Hyatt calls it, the double win.
Yes.
Winning in business, winning in life. And obviously he's been a huge influence on me as well. So thanks for hopping on here and just sharing so openly. I love the abundance mindset that you obviously live and embrace. And I'm excited for you, man. Like, I feel like this is just like chapter 1 or 2. Can't wait to see the continued big things you keep doing.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. Till next time.